Frank Roberts, 24, a recent graduate in computer science and now an official member of the IT department at Harman Industries, found himself surrounded by endless rows of computers, humming servers, and a constant symphony of keyboards being typed on. Frank's brain was always destined for one passion: computers. His current job, though stressful, allowed him to immerse himself in the world of codes and algorithms every day. In the rare quiet hours, Frank's eyes would drift to a framed photo on the wall. It was a picture of his father, a systems programmer in the 80s. "A passion for codes is in the blood, son," his father used to say. However, Frank's life wasn't marked only by zeros and ones. Growing up in a small downtown apartment and being raised by a single mother after his father's early death shaped his character. He had a friendly and charitable personality, perhaps a legacy from his mother who worked as a nurse for over 30 years. His co-workers, though tech-obsessed and typically introverted, felt an undeniable pull towards the warm energy Frank exuded. "Frank, we have a problem with the main server," alerted Liz, one of the software engineers. Without hesitation, Frank rushed to the server room, his heart beating in sync with the hum of the technological giants that safeguarded countless data. Hours flew by, and the sun set. When everyone was on their way home, Frank remained in the office, dedicated to solving the issue. The company's elderly CEO, Mr. Harman, a 70-year-old man with a neatly trimmed gray beard, stopped at the entrance of the server room. He was about to go home but watched him for a moment. "Working late, Frank?" Mr. Harman asked, with a friendly smile. "Yes, Mr. Harman. I'm trying to solve an issue with the server," Frank replied, not taking his eyes off the computer. Mr. Harman nodded, his eyes expressing a mixture of admiration and sympathy. "Good job, Frank. I'm proud to have people like you on my team." And he left, leaving Frank with a sense of satisfaction. When the clock struck midnight, the light from a lone lamp illuminated Frank's face. He smiled. He had fixed the server. He felt a slight tremor of exhaustion, but the thought of his work helping the company, and the gratification it provided, gave him the strength to pack up and head home. Upon arriving home, the silence of the small apartment welcomed Frank. He looked around, seeing remnants of dinners and unpaid bills. A portrait of a recent graduate's life, he thought. He lay down, closed his eyes, and despite the fatigue, smiled. It had been a long and challenging day, but he felt good. He was doing what he loved and helping people while doing it. He was about to fall asleep when the phone rang. The voice on the other end of the line was one of his mother's co-workers from the hospital. The message was simple: "Frank, your mother fainted at work. You need to come to the hospital now." Frank's eyes widened, the fatigue instantly vanished, replaced by a fear he had never felt before. He grabbed his keys and rushed out the door. The chapter of his life that seemed ordinary had ended. A new journey was about to begin. After a day that was meant to be ordinary but turned into a nightmare, Frank found himself back at Harman Industries headquarters. His mother, though weak, was recovering well. He needed a distraction and volunteered to deliver the donations collected by the company to a local orphanage. The Sunshine Orphanage, a temporary home for over 100 children, was an old two-story building that looked like it had seen better days. The paint was faded, some windows were broken, and the garden had more weeds than flowers. But despite this, the place still held a certain charm, like an old tree bravely standing the test of time. Frank disembarked from the van, his arms laden with boxes of donations. He was greeted by a middle-aged woman with kind eyes named Martha, the orphanage's administrator. She thanked him with a genuine smile, but her eyes revealed a profound sadness and fatigue. As they were chatting, a big-eyed boy around 6 years old ran up to them. His name was Kevin, one of the many residents of the orphanage. "What's in the boxes, sir?" Kevin asked, his voice filled with curiosity. "Well, we have clothes, food, toys. Things that will help all of you," Frank replied, laughing at Kevin's animated expression. Toys? Kevin's face lit up. Did you bring cars? He asked, barely containing his excitement. Let's see, Frank said, opening one of the boxes. He rummaged around a bit and pulled out a shiny red car. What do you think of this one? Kevin's eyes sparkled like stars, but to Frank's surprise, the boy shook his head. There are other boys who like cars more than I do. I prefer action figures, but they are rare around here. Kevin's response touched Frank's heart. He felt a mix of sadness and admiration for Kevin's wisdom and consideration. Even at such a young age, he showed such great altruism. Frank spent the rest of the day at the orphanage, helping Martha organize the donations and playing with the children. He met every face, heard every story. He felt every laugh, every hopeful look, and every heavy silence. That afternoon, those moments would be etched in his memory forever. At the end of the day, before leaving, he promised Kevin that he would bring an action figure for him. Kevin smiled and said, "Even if you don't bring it, it's okay. Just having you here is a gift." With those words ringing in his ears, Frank went home, his heart heavy but full of determination. He knew what he had to do. The children of Sunshine Orphanage deserved more. He would do whatever was in his power to ensure that. The day that began with heartbreak ended with renewed purpose. Frank looked up at the night sky and made a silent promise. He was ready for whatever was to come next. After all, the journey was just beginning. Frank's next visit to the Sunshine Orphanage was marked by a surprise. When he arrived, he saw a black BMW parked at the entrance. It was unusual to see luxury cars in that area, which piqued his curiosity. Upon entering, he came face to face with a young blonde with curly hair, speaking with Martha. She was dressed in expensive clothing, but there was a simplicity about her that contrasted with all of that. "Ah, Frank!" Martha exclaimed upon seeing him. "Let me introduce Diana, Mr. Oliver Richmond's daughter. She is a major benefactor of our orphanage." Diana turned to Frank and greeted him with a smile. "Nice to meet you, Frank." Frank returned the greeting but was somewhat suspicious. He had heard about Diana before. As the daughter of one of the country's richest men, she was known for her frequent donations to various charities. Some said it was merely a way to improve her family's public image. But there she was, in a crumbling orphanage, away from cameras and the spotlight. Throughout the day, Frank observed Diana interacting with the children, laughing with them, listening to their stories. She didn't seem to be pretending. Her affection for the children appeared genuine, deeply touching Frank's heart. "I don't understand, Diana," Frank said to her during lunch. "Why do you do this? Your family already has a very good image. You don't need this." Diana looked at him with deep eyes and responded with a sincerity that took him aback. "You're right, Frank. My family has a good image. But I don't do this for my family, or for the image. I do this because these children need help. They need to know that someone cares about them." There was a pause, and then Diana added, "And believe me, I know what it's like to need someone and have no one." These words resonated with Frank. He too knew loneliness, the need for someone. He looked at Diana with new eyes. Beneath the rich girl image was a gentle soul, willing to extend a hand to those in need. Frank spent the rest of the day working alongside Diana, distributing donations, playing with the children. For the first time in a long time, he felt a genuine connection with someone. When it came time to say goodbye, Diana looked at Frank and said, "You're a good person, Frank. Thank you for today." Frank felt a wave of warmth flow through his body. "I should be thanking you, Diana. Today was a good day." They said their goodbyes with a smile, each feeling something new and exciting within them. And so, under the orange evening sky, a new connection was established. A connection that would change both of their lives in ways they could not yet imagine. Ever since the day he spent with Diana at the orphanage, Frank couldn't get Kevin out of his mind. The boy's joy over a simple toy had deeply impacted him. Frank knew he needed to do something, and he couldn't simply content himself with being just another bystander. On payday, he went straight from the office to a toy store in the city center. As he walked through the aisles filled with colorful toys and animated dolls, Frank couldn't stop thinking about the children at the orphanage. He imagined the faces of each of them, especially Kevin, seeing all those presents. Without a second thought, he spent his entire salary on toys. Cars, dolls, games, everything he believed could bring a smile to those children's faces. As he left the store, his car was full of bags, and his heart full of hope. Upon arriving at the orphanage the next day, the surprise on Martha's face was indescribable. "Frank, this is incredible," she said, unable to hide her astonishment and admiration. Frank smiled, his heart pounding in his chest. But the moment he had really been waiting for came when Kevin walked into the room. The boy stopped, his eyes widening at the sight of the pile of toys that Frank had brought. "Is this all for us?" Kevin asked, his eyes shining. Frank nodded, feeling a lump in his throat. "Yes, Kevin. All of this is for you." The joy that followed was something Frank would never forget. The laughter and excited screams of the children, the gratitude in Martha's eyes, all of it made every penny spent worth it. At the end of the day, as he was leaving, Kevin came running up to him. "Thank you, Frank," the boy said, hugging him tightly. "I've never had so many toys before." Frank crouched down and gave the boy a warm smile. "You're welcome, Kevin. And remember, there will always be people who care about you, okay?" With that act, Frank not only gave the children toys but also hope. He showed them that there are people in the world willing to extend a hand, to bring joy. And that day, Frank realized that perhaps true overcoming doesn't come only from overcoming one's own problems, but from helping others overcome theirs. The day following Frank's act of kindness, he returned to the orphanage, not only with a sense of accomplishment but also with the hope of seeing the happy faces of the children playing with their new toys. Upon arrival, he was surprised by a familiar face, Diana, the millionaire's daughter he had met on his first visit. Diana watched with a look of surprise and admiration at the toys scattered around the orphanage, the smiles on the children's faces, and the lively atmosphere that had formed. Seeing Frank, she walked towards him, her eyes shining with an expression he couldn't decipher. "Frank," she began, "I didn't expect to see you here again. And even less did I expect this." Diana gestured towards the toys and the playing children. Frank shrugged, trying to appear unassuming, although a warm feeling spread through his chest. "I just wanted to do something for them, Diana. They deserve much more than they have." Diana's gaze intensified, and Frank felt a hint of respect in her expression. "You have a big heart, Frank. That's very rare." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of the orphanage director. Diana, who had taken on a more investigative position regarding the activities of the orphanage, noticed something suspicious in the director's expression when he saw her. "I would like to see the records of recent donations," Diana asked, her tone friendly, but firm. The director hesitated for a moment, but realizing he had no choice, led Diana to his office. After examining the documents, Diana discovered worrying discrepancies. The donations she and her father had made did not seem to have been used for the benefit of the children. In a tense confrontation with the director, Diana challenged, "The donations we made should have improved the conditions here, but it seems that didn't happen. Where is the money, sir?" The director stumbled over his words, trying to dodge the question, but Diana remained steadfast. Frustrated and angry, Diana threatened to withdraw her financial support for the orphanage unless a full audit was conducted and the mistakes corrected. By the end of that day, Diana's admiration for Frank had grown, but her heart also weighed heavy with the discovery of irregularities at the orphanage. The chapter ends with Diana contemplating her next actions, while Frank, ignorant of the confrontation, continues to engage with the children and their new toys, creating an atmosphere of uncertainty and anticipation for the next chapter. In the weeks following their confrontation with the orphanage's director, Frank and Diana found themselves drawn closer to each other. Their shared commitment to the orphanage and the children brought out a bond that neither had anticipated. As the days turned into weeks, a profound connection was forged, leading them to a decision that would alter their lives forever. One day, in the soft glow of the setting sun, Frank turned to Diana, holding her hands in his. He looked into her eyes, and with a sincerity that touched her very soul, he asked, "Diana, will you marry me?" Diana, taken aback at first, found her eyes welling up with tears of joy. With a nod and a choked yes, she accepted his proposal, her heart brimming with love for the man who had shown her what it truly meant to care. As they began preparing for their wedding, Diana took it upon herself to address the irregularities in the orphanage. She called upon the director, who now regarded her with a mix of apprehension and respect. Diana, however, was not there to chastise him further. Instead, she offered a second chance. "I believe in redemption," she declared, her tone firm but compassionate. "I believe that people can change, and I'm willing to give you an opportunity to make it right." The director, overwhelmed, promised to correct the wrongs. Diana's forgiveness not only displayed her capacity for growth but also instilled a sense of responsibility in him, pushing him towards the path of honesty. Meanwhile, the wedding preparations were in full swing. Despite Diana's wealthy background, they opted for a simple ceremony, focusing on their love and commitment rather than opulence. The joyous day finally arrived, marked by the laughter of their close friends and the orphanage children who had become an integral part of their lives. They exchanged vows in a serene garden, under a sky lit by the setting sun. As they stepped out of the ceremony as husband and wife, the guests erupted in cheer, but the couple only had eyes for each other. Their hearts were full of love and hope for their shared future, blissfully unaware of the significant surprise that was to come. The chapter ends with a sense of celebration, but also an air of suspense, setting the stage for the impending twist in their tale. As the sun set on the day of their wedding, Frank and Diana, now happily married, were enveloped in a bubble of joy and contentment. The laughter and music from the celebration were slowly fading into the background, replaced by a serene quietude that only the newlyweds shared. They stood hand in hand, watching the sun dip below the horizon, a sight as beautiful as the day they had just lived. A feeling of calm happiness washed over them, a sense of completion and new beginnings. Their hearts filled with love, they turned to join their guests, their steps in harmony with their synced heartbeats. As they approached the gathering, they noticed a hushed excitement among their friends and the children from the orphanage. In the middle of the crowd was a large, elegantly wrapped box, a surprise gift that was not on their registry. Frank and Diana exchanged a look, curiosity piqued. Under the watchful eyes of their well-wishers, Diana carefully untied the ribbon while Frank held the box steady. A collective intake of breath echoed around them as the lid was lifted. But the narrative holds the revelation back, letting the anticipation build, keeping the secret a mystery. Their eyes widened in surprise, their mouths opening in unison as they took in the sight in front of them. The crowd leaned in, the hushed whispers reaching a crescendo. But no one, except Frank and Diana, knew what the box contained. The couple turned to their guests, their faces reflecting surprise, joy, and an unspoken secret. The surprise that had arrived on their wedding day was an enigma that revealed itself slowly, piece by piece, like the unfolding of a complex origami figure. The shock, joy, and disbelief that had echoed in their voices on that day continued to resonate in their lives, ushering in a wave of change they had not foreseen. The box, a Pandora's case of sorts, had held documents and photographs, revealing that the kindly old businessman who Frank had always respected was in fact Diana's estranged grandfather. He had kept his identity a secret, observing and aiding them from the shadows. His passing had brought about the revelation, and a sizable inheritance that Frank and Diana were entrusted with, on the condition that they continue their work for the orphanage and help other such institutions. This twist of fate brought new challenges with it. The wealth was staggering, and the responsibility that came with it, overwhelming. There were legal procedures to follow, investments to understand, and, above all, the legacy of a man they admired to uphold. Their everyday life turned into a whirlwind of meetings with lawyers and financial advisors. Each day brought a new challenge, testing their resilience and strength as a couple. However, the love they held for each other was their rock, the firm ground amidst the chaos. Amid all the change, they kept their promise to the old man and the children of the orphanage. They started visiting the orphanage more frequently, even in the midst of their hectic schedules, ensuring their initiatives were making a real difference. The once small IT expert and heiress were now philanthropists in their own right, their love story intertwined with the lives they were impacting. There were moments of frustration and exhaustion, arguments over decisions to be made, but through it all, they stayed together. The challenges that came with the inheritance only served to bring them closer, strengthening their bond. Their shared vision and promise to the old man united them in a way nothing else could. As they looked back at the chain of events their wedding surprise had set into motion, they realized their lives had been forever changed. Their journey had been arduous, but they had risen to the challenge, and the result was a world that was a little bit better because of their actions. They fell asleep each night knowing they were making a difference, their hearts full of love for each other and the children they served. Did you like this story? Comment below what you think and subscribe to our channel. See you in the next video.